Hello, and welcome to Relative Pitch, a podcast about music, culture, and society from a young perspective. Our initiative is to bring fresh new ideas to the music field. Here are your hosts, Lauren Green, Anthony Morris, and Michael Brown. So, Dr. Moses and Professor Jackson, what are you both doing during this year to celebrate Black History Month during a pandemic?
Well, I'll begin. I've got several performances during the month of February, and many of them unexpectedly so, because I felt February was going to be, with the pandemic going on, it was going to be rather quiet. And then suddenly things started happening. So, beginning right away with February 12th, I think both Tyrone and we are performing for students at KSU with the Music Coalition, I believe. And we're both on that performance. And then on February 20th, KSU is having its Black History Month program. And I think it's with the whole School of Music is somewhat involved in that. Wow. And so I'm participating in that. And then finally, on February 26th, I am decided at the last minute that I would do a recital of spirituals, of which I'm calling Spiritual Sankofa. And you know, the word Sankofa is to return, to look back. It is the bird that's moving forward with its head looking back. And so thinking of that as looking back at the Negro spiritual as sort of a foundational form of music for the music that we do. And then all the way in April, I'm doing a sort of a brief overview of African American music for the Rotary Club in San Francisco. So So that's enough of that. But it's all, and I guess finally in June, I'm doing a recital also for Fisk University, and they're celebrating the month of Black Music Month, and they've asked me to do a recital. So I'll do a few things that's going to be happening, and I'm hoping that by June things will be a little bit better for us. You know, since I've had my vaccine already, I'm hoping
wow.
that. Yep. So, okay. So,
well, I wish I would have gone first now, since you're so prolific, Dr. Moses.
What do you mean?
But yeah, I do have. So the first thing that I have is February 6th, this upcoming Saturday. I'm doing a recording. It was supposed to be a concert, but because of COVID, I'm happy that they decided to do a recording that they're going to stream. But it's with this wonderful trombone player named Wycliffe Gordon.
Oh yeah.
He played with the Lincoln Center Jazz Band with Wynton Marsalis. He's also he's in Augusta right now teaching out there, and he's just.
That's where I'm from.
Oh really?
Okay. Yes. Okay.
You might know his sister Karen Gordon is an educator out there. She's a pianist. But he's an incredible writer, arranger, and we are recording a suite that he wrote at the Douglas Theater in Macon on February 6th. And
that's where we're from. Me and Michael are from Macon. You're just
really wow. So wow, I'm covering all the bases, huh?
Yes.
So it's going to be great. I look forward to going to that theater. There's so much history behind it, and I think that, like Dr. Moses says, when we get to that theater, we can maybe create better music with knowing our ancestors that gone before us. You know? And it's very serious when you think about how far we have come with so much against us. To create this music that's indigenous to America, that's affected the world, and it's from the most humble beginnings. This music started from our culture and is known as American music across the planet, you know.
Right.
So and I know Dr. Moses doesn't take that lightly. As a matter of fact, he gave me a poster. Dr. Moses was so giving. He gave me his office, and as a parting gift, he gave me this poster with all the jazz greats, just the lineage, and it's chronologically set up. I just love the poster. I'm going to get it professionally mounted, and once I redo my office, I'm going to put it in there, in my home office, not my school office.
Yeah, great.
But,
well, good. That's it.
Right.
I wanted to give it to someone that I knew. I said, need to give this poster to someone that I can really appreciate, and I know they're going to appreciate it.
Yes.
So I'm totally satisfied with that.
Thank you. And I use it as a teaching mechanism. I roll it out and show my students this is where it came from. And so then the other thing that I'm most proud of is the Black Musicians Coalition.
Oh, yeah.
I am the faculty advisor to the group. And I will say I was really, really busy. And as much as I wanted to be on it at first, I didn't think I had the time enough to give them what I thought they would need to have. But surprisingly, everybody banded together and said, Professor Jackson, look, just sign up the paperwork. You see what we can do later on. And the students were so driven that it moved me to say yes. It moved me to say, okay, whatever capacity y'all need me in, that's fine. Because I didn't want to cheat them out of the experience of pushing forward this initiative that hasn't been put forth before. And I don't want to be the reason why it wasn't, if it was mediocre. I wanted it to be great. But moved by their just overwhelming energy toward it, I said, yeah, whatever responsibility y'all need me in. So with Dr. Moses, we're also going to be performing on the 13th, right?
The 12th.
12th? 12th.
Yeah, 12th.
Okay, that's the Friday. Yes, the Friday.
Right.
12th.
Okay.
Yes, got to get the dates right. I better show
Yes.
up.
Yes.
And I will say they was getting ready to work me and say, hey, Professor Jackson, you can play for this, you can play for that. I was like, no, I can't.
Right.
But I'm very excited. I had a rehearsal with Chris, and we went over the duet that we're playing, and I'm really looking forward to playing that, as well as all the other performances it's going to be. So I'm looking forward to a good time. And I also have something in Milledgeville, but that's going to be closer toward the 20th, I think. It hasn't unfolded fully because, of COVID, and they're still trying to figure out if they're going to do a socially distanced concert and if it's going to be cold. And, Milledgeville, Lauren, is on the way to Augusta. So, So, like I said, that pales in comparison to Dr. Moses, but,
No, and we're all out there just trying to do something,
Right, you're right.
And the important thing is that we don't stop in the month of February, because the celebration of the music of African American, I think it goes 24/7, 12 months out of the year.
Amen.
That's why I mentioned June already, because
I was
keep
telling
moving.
somebody the other day that he was talking about the Green Book Manual. You guys know what Green Book manuals are? And if y'all don't know, it's the manual of places that you can stay over in segregated South, and places where you can eat and not be harassed and stuff like that, And so in the process, they was talking about how they showed a documentary how the people said you never paid with a $20 bill because they wouldn't give you change back. You'd have to pay with exact change or fill up that $20 and all these different things. And I told the guy, he said, this is Black history. I said, no, this is history. It's not just Black history. This is American history. This is what happened. And I think that too often we put a Black History Month, like we as Black people need to know about Black history. But this is America's history. And you don't want to talk about the bad things, but just like our families, there's bad things that's happening in our families, and we have to address it, you know? And so if we all want to be one, and hopefully with Biden and Kamala Harris, that we have this thing that we all have to come together, because we are all together. And you can look at Kamala and her racial makeup being, and even Obama being half white, half Black, but America looks at him as being the first Black president. Or Kamala Harris being the first Black woman vice president. Why is that? Because America has determined what parts of history they want to say is this and that. And so this is, if you want to choose what history you want to choose, you got to choose all of it. You can't just say, this
Yes.
is Black history, and we're just doing it 28 and maybe 29 days of February.
Right.
This is all of our history. So
It's all about history. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And
But that's an interesting. I need to chat with you. You just mentioned the Green Book. See,
Yeah.
you guys should know you can't invite us on to do this.
This is true. This is true.
Green Book, my pianist, the man who has been my friend for 40 years and plays for me in Germany, his grandfather, he grew up in Denver, Colorado. And it was at his grandfather's house, George Morrison, who was a Black violinist in the 1920s. Their house was one of the houses where all the Black jazz musicians stayed when they traveled out west. And so his mom grew up with having people like Duke Ellington at their house, Nat King Cole, all these top artists. They had no place to stay. When they came to Denver, they all went to George Morrison's house, and that's where they stayed. So that's, quite a bit of history.
Such rich history. And,
Yes.
you know, all of this history that we're talking about, I mean, that's why we really wanted this week's to be the impact of both jazz, gospel, spirituals throughout the Black experience. Because for so many times, like, no one really talks about that unless it's Black History Month. And I think when I was in college, that's what I really wanted to focus on, is that Black experience. Where are the Black composers? Where are the Black musicians? And I do want to say for the KSU Black Music Coalition, let me tell you, they are all of my babies. They are, started. Just seeing what they're doing around there in KSU, oh my goodness. And that brings me to my first question for both of you. Seeing that both of you are at KSU and you've seen all of this things go on through that last year, and seeing the Black Music Coalition be formed, does that make y'all proud? Like, are y'all super duper proud of just seeing that these are the students of tomorrow? These are the students of today. How does that make y'all feel about that?
I think I'll start off. I think that, and Dr. Moses could back me up on this. I think the students have always been there. I think the opportunity, and I have to give it up to the present administration that's going out of their way to make sure that they are like, think about where our university is. It's in Kennesaw, right? Which is, they still have a Confederate like shop and museum right down in the town of Kennesaw.
Yeah, we protested it.
Right, exactly. And for that to still exist, and for the university says no, which is a state university, to say no, we're going to honor this out of duress, out of maybe George Floyd bringing awareness to it, is a big thing. What I'm most proud of is that the students are stepping up in a way where they're not letting anger dictate where they move from here. And listen, the emotions are really real, and if we don't deal with the emotions, you can get sick if you don't deal with these emotions. And after what happened with George Floyd and so many others, and Breonna Taylor and stuff, the emotions were bubbling over. And when we find out that movement of the Black in the arts and stuff like that, and then everybody started sharing their stories, it became a movement that you guys took. And some of you guys took knowing that y'all were going to graduate from school and have to leave y'all baby with other people to take care of, which I applaud you guys for doing. And so I'm proud of you guys who stepped up and started it. But the most thing I'm proud of right now is that I get the group texts and see how much excellence there needs to be out of this program and how they're pushing it for it. And I really see the improvement in the singular focus of our Black people in the arts. And I'm just ready for it to just proliferate all over the university. So yeah, I'm proud of this time. I'm also proud of our university for stepping forward and saying we want to deal with diversity and inclusion.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, look, I have history at Kennesaw. I came to Kennesaw 2 years after it had become a 4-year school, and it was raw. It was, I mean, I think I was the first full-time African-American faculty hired in the Department of Music. And I was among 7 African-Americans that was hired at one time that came in 1984.
Wow.
At Kennesaw. And so we had less than 100 students of color on campus. And the student population was like 4,800 students.
Wow.
Okay. So it was a very interesting campus, although I had wonderful students in the Department of Music. I had one African-American voice major who was there. And that's basically how I started in 84. And so it was up to the Black faculty that had just started there, that if there was going to be anything in recognition or honoring the history of African Americans during the month of February, we had to do it. And we had to do it kind of in an uphill situation, so to speak. And the only place that we could hold anything was in the student center at lunchtime, when all of the students were in buying food and cash registers clanging, and all, you know, you had students sitting around you that weren't interested at all and were really kind of like against you doing it. And so we almost had to force, we did, our way into presenting a program. But we did it because we had the backing of the president, Betty Siegel, and she wanted us to do it. And so she would sit there, and what we would do, invite the Black community to come in. So you had this interesting kind of conglomeration of people. You had the students who were in Kennesaw, white students, you had maybe 1 or 2 Black students, you had a few folk from the Black community, and you had the Black professors all there trying to celebrate Black History Month and trying to do one little program that was interrupting people, and probably for some people it's saying, yes, we did it, you know. But that's basically where having recognition of African Americans on that campus, it came from that standpoint. And so, and we made sure that in those early days that we would always emphasize having something in your department or in your school that celebrated African American music or just the history of African Americans. Yeah. Okay, so it is really wonderful to know that that is still going on. Mm-hmm. And it came from that all the way back there, 1984, when there was nothing and we had to create it, okay? And so it is, we have to keep it moving. So we're looking to those babies who have started the Black Music Coalition to do whatever you do that will move it forward, you know, just a celebration, because Kennesaw State University is a state school, okay, where we celebrate all the many different kinds of cultures and diversity, okay? And so, and that's what it should be every year, celebrating who we are and really making sure that we are visible on that campus, okay?
Yes.
Yeah. And I would say that Dr. Moses has been a trailblazer for me coming in as the Black African-American musician now coming into faculty full time. And I just leaned on him heavily. And if it wasn't for anything, and it's something I want you guys to recognize, Dr. Moses always has a smile on his face. He's always, but besides his amazing talent is his work ethic and knowledge. And if it wasn't for his ability to be great at his craft, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be at Kennesaw, because the legitimacy of what he does and what he is known all around the world, right? And when I said I was going to Kennesaw, John Lawless, who I played with at a church that we was playing at, he said, "Hey, you're going to be there?" He says, "Man," he says, "Dr. Moses is incredible. You need to meet him soon as you get there." And I said, "Yeah, I've heard of Dr. Moses, but and the great thing is, my teacher when I was growing up was Moses Hogan. So to hear oral Moses, and my teacher was Moses Hogan, who desperately wanted me to go to Dillard University, where he taught, and where my mother went to Dillard University. But I went to UNO, University of New Orleans, where Alice Marcellus came back and came there. But anyway, so I had heard of Dr. Moses, and John Lawless says, "You will never hear a singer like him before." And I said, "Well, where did you hear him?" He's like, "At the faculty concert, he sang," and he said, "No microphone." And he said, "I was way in the back." And he said, "I heard his voice just pure from the front to the back." And he says, "He works hard, and he's intelligent, and he knows his history, and he's so musical, and all these different things." And this is a top-notch performer with the Atlanta Symphony, is telling me this before I even met Dr. Moses. So his legacy went on before I even got there. And I said, I have to promote myself with the same intensity, with the same kind of excellence, and the same kind of humility that I see Dr. Moses. And wouldn't you know, Dr. Moses let me use his office when I got there, because I was sharing the office with Sam Skelton, but I was so happy to be able to get an office now that I've just taken over. I don't even know when you're in there, Dr. Moses. I'm sorry.
Look, I planned not to be in there.
You know, this is, I got beside myself. I would have to say, just to hearing y'all talk is just amazing. I did not ask y'all to introduce yourselves, to tell us about a little part of your life. Where did you start from? What colleges did you go to? How did you end up at the place you are right now? I'm sorry I got beside myself. I just love hearing y'all talk.
So look, before we do that, I did not know that you studied with Moses Hogan.
I did, yes.
Either. I love Moses Hogan. Oh my God.
Look, and Moses Hogan and I did performance together here in Atlanta. We talked, and we, just before, he took my CDs and we were in touch, and he wrote me back. He said, "I've listened to one of your CDs and I really like it. I'm going to listen to the other." And that's when he had that massive, what was it? Whatever, aneurysm or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, but Moses Hogan, we were trying to follow him because I came to Michigan. I was at Michigan. Moses Hogan came to Michigan as a piano major, stayed 2 weeks and left.
Wow.
So, but at any rate, let me not get, okay, go ahead.
You want me to go first? Oh, wow. Okay.
Right.
Well, since we mentioned Moses Hogan, well, let me just kind of get started. My mother, I have two brothers that's really close in age. My older brother is only 13 months older than I am. My younger brother is 3 years younger than I am. So my mother saw the value in music, but her mother worked really hard to get a piano for my mother. My mother played it for 2 weeks and then quit. And she played saxophone for school, and then she quit. So my mom said that she blamed her mother that she didn't make her stick with it. So she wasn't going to do that with us. So we started off taking piano lessons, and we started getting really, really good. And next thing you know, we started outgrowing our neighborhood teacher, which she was really good, but she had the insight to say, "Hey, you guys need to move on." And she recommended Moses Hogan. Well, actually, I digress. There's this, I was auditioning for NOCA, which is New Orleans Center for Creative Arts. And a guy by the name of Dr. Roger Dickerson taught at Southern University in New Orleans. And I started taking lessons with him first, but then his schedule got hectic because he was a composer as well. And when I auditioned for NOCA, they turned me on to Moses Hogan. And so when I studied with Moses Hogan, me and my two brothers studied with him. And most people don't know how incredible of a classical pianist he is.
Yes.
And I mean, everything I didn't know that. Well, I'll talk about it in a second, how he got into the writing the spirituals. So I remember went to his condo downtown in this district, this mills. It was an old mill that they turned. I can't think of the name of it, but I've never seen a Black person live like that. He had a spacious pad, a beautiful Steinway piano, and all this stuff. And I said, what is he doing? I was like, I want to do that. And he had, like, at that time, he had a brand new Jetta, whatever, Volkswagen Jetta. Not too many people had Volkswagen Jettas. I was like, man. And so he had done some recordings, and so then my parents got divorced, and my mom said she only had enough money to keep one of us in piano lessons. And so that happened to be me. I was a little bit better than my older brother and younger brother. And I seemed like I had much more of a direction and focus toward it. So I stayed with Moses Hogan. I think they got divorced when I was in 9th grade. So 10th through 12th, I was with Moses Hogan, and he wanted me to go to Dillard University, and I applied, got a scholarship. But then I found out Ellis Marcellus, the father of Wynton and Branford Marcellus, moved to UNO, where he got a grant, an endowment from the Coca-Cola bottling company, which is crazy. So that's when I decided I wanted to do jazz. Now, here's the crazy thing. As much as Moses Hogan did, I didn't see a future with me in classical music, because I didn't have the start that most of my contemporaries did have. And I didn't think I was really willing to put in the work to there's this girl, and she was a white American girl, and she was all world playing classical music. And when she graduated from college, she worked as a florist. And I'm like, if she can't make it as good as she is, what's going to happen with me? And I saw, Moses Hogan was telling me, he's like, I've competed. And he said, I got close to getting the Van Cliburn Award, but if you don't get first place in the Van Cliburn Award, or even third place, whatever, your career is limited, what you can do, especially as an African-American, So in the course of studying at UNO, I said, well, I love jazz, and New Orleans is a hodgepodge of all these different styles of music. So I said, well, I really want to start studying jazz. And so I was doing that. And in the program setup, there was this guy named Victor Goins. He was really young, phenom. I didn't know he was really close to our age, but he told me that he was going to be working with Moses Hogan. I said, well, what are you working on with Moses Hogan on? He was very proficient at Finale when it first came out. In fact, Victor Goins was so proficient at it that he sent Finale 200 fixes that they needed to do, and they did it because he sent them in. So I said, what do you mean you work with Moses Hogan on something? I said, that was my teacher. He's like, oh, okay. He said, well, he's doing these spirituals, and I'm helping him engrave it and put it into Finale. And I said, what? So the first thing I think he did was either Go Down Moses or Joshua Fit the Battle or Jericho, one of those. And it instantly became repertoire. And all of the spirituals was like repertoire across the board. And next thing I know, he must have moved into an even bigger place, because I couldn't even talk to Moses Hogan after that. He was touring all around the world. And just to be able to be this classical pianist and find another niche was incredible to me. And I think as musicians, we always got to wear different hats. We never know what's going to stick, but just to have that background. So anyway, so I went to University of New Orleans, studied with Ellis Marcellus, which was great. And then I left there and moved to Georgia. And the crazy thing is, I quit school. I left school. I was engaged to get married, and we decided to try to find a place. She was a musician as well. She was a gospel musician, and I didn't really know a lot about gospel music. And she taught me about gospel as I was teaching her about jazz. And we decided to move to Atlanta, and she was a music teacher, and we broke up. We started arguing as soon as we got to the border. Well, I had too much pride to go back to New Orleans, because I was like, I left some gigs behind, and I was just getting my name out in New Orleans. So I decided I was going to try to make it work in Atlanta. But I realized I was working with some people who would call me in to help with their jazz band and stuff. They would pay me $50, $75, $100 here. And I said to myself, I have this knowledge, but I don't have a piece of paper to show that I have this knowledge. And I was like, these people are paying me a little bit of money to help out. Although I was thankful but I was like, why can't I do the things that they're doing? It's because I don't have this piece of paper, you know? So one of the hardest things I ever did was go back and forth between Atlanta and New Orleans and finished up my degree within one semester. It was crazy to do it. And that's why you have to have a good support system around you, you know? And a friend of mine, she told me, she said, look, it's only going to seem like it seemed like it's long, but it's going to be over with before you know it. Just stay the course. And I made a point to myself, I was going to try to get the best grades I could get, not to skimp on anything. And when you get older, you look back and see that the money that I owe in school loans and stuff like that, that was my money that I was paying. I should have taken my education much more seriously because this is my money I've been paying, you know? And so when I went back, I got a 3.75 grade point average when I did that. And then a year later, I got hired by Kennesaw State University when it was just starting. They didn't even have the jazz program yet, but Sam Skelton, he had some students that were learning jazz and they were putting on these concerts, and some of the people wanted to learn how to play jazz piano. So I was adjunct faculty at that point.
Right.
So then I went back to Georgia State and got my master's degree, and I finished with a 4.12 grade point average. I got straight A's across the board, A pluses and stuff. So I made up in my mind that I was not going to cheat myself. I was going to give it the best I can. If I made a B, it was because that's all I could get was a B. But if there was a chance, an opportunity for me to get an A, I was going to get an A. And so thankfully, much later, I was teaching an improv class, and we got the jazz degree program, and it started growing. And Sam Skelton and Trey Wright, they were both full-time, but it grew so quickly that I started getting classes. And then a teacher, I can't think of the teacher's name, was cross-listed with American Studies, the blues class. And by me getting that blues class, that pushed me overtime into a full-time position. And I remember getting called in Dr. Alexander's office, Michael Alexander, who was the interim School of Music director.
Right.
He said, hey, Tyrone, just want to let you know, we got a problem. Where you are right now, you would be considered full-time, and the university would have to pay you and have insurance for you. Or we'd have to cut your hours and hire somebody else, because you could sue the state, since it's a state school, if you are not getting insurance, but you have a lot of these hours. So I'm saying, I thought it was something positive, but when he said he's going to cut the hours, I'm like, oh man, am I about to be demoted or something? What is going on? And he said, no, but we're not going to do that. He said, we have one professor that's retiring, and there's two other people that's in the same boat, and we're going to split their salary and allow you to be full-time. I was like, oh, thank you, God. I was like, I thought I was about to be gone. And that's how I got to Kennesaw. And that's how I got to become full-time. So that's my story.
That's nice. Dr. Moses, what was your road to where you are right now?
Good grief. I left high school, graduated from high school, and back in the Brown Shoe Army. Before all of you were born, I was almost drafted into the Army, Vietnam Army, a war. And I did go, but I didn't go to Vietnam. I ended up going to Germany. And when I got in Germany, they had two courses, singing courses, Army courses. One which was just in a small little regiment, and another one that was really kind of main chorus for Germany. And so I auditioned. It was the 7th Army Soldiers course, and I made it. I got in. And they would audition about 500 soldiers per year, and they had only 30 people in the group. So I got into that group, and I spent the next 2.5 years as a singing soldier and did 260 some performances throughout Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, in all the NATO countries. So that's how I spent my military career. And when I came from that, it's making a long story short, I auditioned and got into Fisk University. When I got into Fisk University, I auditioned and became a Jubilee singer and spent the next years as a Jubilee singer at Fisk University and graduated and won a fellowship to Europe, went back to Europe again after I graduated, spent a year in Europe, and then came back and was admitted to the University of Michigan for a master's and a doctoral program there. And so finished my work there. And after all of that, I had two offers. One to go to Penn State, and the other one to come to this little school that I had never heard of in my life. And I was kind of leery about coming to Georgia. I was like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to South. Because as a child, we had moved from South Carolina, which was segregated, to Connecticut. And so I spent all my formative years, high school years and all, in Connecticut. And I was like, I'm never going back to the South again. But so lo and behold, I end up coming back to the South because my mother had worked and had retired and moved back to South Carolina. So I said, I'll go to Georgia. I'll be close to my mother because I can go and see her often. And who knows it, but I did that, and I'll say this and move on. I got here on August 29th, and because of an illness, my mother passed away on August 30th. So I was like, okay, now I've done all that. Just for my mother, she passed away. But at any rate, so I've spent the years here at Kennesaw, and it's been really good for me because of, I think what I've been able to do as far as my career, I did not want to have a career specifically in opera, but I wanted to have a career teaching as well as performing. And I've been able to do that. I've spent I've done 30 Christmases in Germany every year. So I've been fortunate enough that I'm asked to come to Europe every year for performances. And so I did that, and I'm still doing that, and teaching. So people say, well, you can't really have a career in music and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I can't say that because I've had a wonderful career in music. And Tyrone, I guess you can say the same thing. I'm having I don't regret studying music at all. I don't regret what I do. And if I had to do it all over again, I would try to do it just a little bit better, but the same thing. Yeah. So that's it briefly about me. So and I say I'm still performing, still teaching, and who knows when it will stop, but one day.
This is just awesome for me, like learning more about like how y'all grew up, how you're like so good at your craft now and how you're portraying it. I have a question for y'all. What do y'all see lacking in today's music education pertaining to jazz and gospel education?
Well, I can continue talking. First and foremost, I think at many of the schools, there are jazz programs that we've had jazz choruses and we've had jazz bands, and we can name some of the bigger schools that have had, like Dallas-Fort Worth, University of Texas at Dallas-Fort Worth. We can talk about New England Conservatory and that book, Gunther Schuller, who wrote the book on jazz. We can talk about, there are any number of big schools that have had jazz programs. But I think where it falls down is when you get into the smaller schools that can't afford to have instrumental programs. And then of course, don't always have the students to offer courses. So, but I think jazz has always fared far better especially in the undergraduate curriculum, Okay, and I know because I taught introduction to jazz when I first came to Kennesaw, and you know, and well, I won't say any more than that, but Tyrone will understand the level at which you teach that. Okay, but the one genre of music that has not had any recognition in academia has been gospel. Yes. Okay, and so that has always been hard because, and we can look back at that, it has never had, gospel has always been sort of a grassroots kind of music and wasn't even allowed on campus until the 1960s when students forced it on campus. And that was right after the assassination of Martin Luther King. Okay. And I was a freshman at Fisk University in 1971. And in 1969 was when students at Howard, at Fisk, at Clark College here in Atlanta, at Miles, at Payne, and these are all HBCU campuses, where they decided they wanted to have gospel music on campus, music that was more akin to the African American community. And they started this, but they had to fight the administration in order to have it on campus. So I got there in 1971 in the midst of the fights, when students were literally fighting the administration, fighting the alumni of these schools, and fighting their parents. Because gospel music was not that kind of music that anyone who was to be educated that should be singing. You know, that music is not, it's not good music. You're gonna ruin your voices, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do all of that. But students were determined. And so out of that came gospel choirs on campus. And so today, and that spread from the HBCU campuses onto the more mixed college campuses, okay? So that's why we have gospel choirs on campus. And out of that, we are finally growing into gospel, and at some schools having a chorus, but gospel having more recognition on campuses now. I think it is an accepted group, or I say ensemble, on campuses now. And in fact, you'd hardly want to go to a campus and say, y'all don't have a gospel choir? They kind of go, no, really? Okay. So it's become that now. But I think gospel still has a ways to go. Although I would not be surprised if somebody would not start offering some kind of study or academic approach to gospel music. Okay, but that's my take on it. So,
well, just like Dr. Moses says there, so the only one I know about is Berkeley that has like a gospel track, as far as kind of like even teaching musicians how to play gospel. The evolution of jazz in universities, like Dr. Moses said, it's been around for a long time. Indiana, and like you said, Gunther Schuller, who wrote all about it. And then you look at the success of Wynton Marsalis, who won his Grammy in classical trumpet and jazz, which really opened up the door in the 80s for this resurgence of jazz music. And then also with the advent of classical musicians realizing that they have to diversify in order to get work, because it's not everybody's going to be able to play for the symphony. You know, there's only a limited amount of seats there. So if you're going to work theater shows, you got to have some knowledge of chord symbols and chord changes and using your ear, which back in the day, most classical musicians were able to improvise cadenzas, minuets. What is Bach but figured bass is the same thing as chord changes that we do now. But it became a lost art because the premium of European-centric education has been on reading music. And if you go to Europe, it's not just reading music, it's oral tradition. If you look at Suzuki method, it's about hearing first. If you look at the gospel music tradition, It comes from the West African lineage of African storytellers. And so it's an oral tradition. And most people found out, historians found out that it was a very accurate means of delivering information. Not that Africans didn't have universities, did not have libraries. It was just a tradition, an oral tradition of telling stories, and you had to learn them verbatim. Well, think about when you learn gospel music, when you learn jazz, it's an oral tradition. The first time I learned a jazz thing, somebody did beep ba ba do ba do ba, and that's what you have to learn. And nobody wrote down F E fa da da. Nobody wrote that down first. It's when we started bringing it to academia where it's becoming a thing where you're writing stuff down. And then now with the advent of YouTube, you can copy everything. My problem with education is this. You have to think about what the word theory is. It's theory, not truth. It's not a law, it's theory. And what happens is we teach theory as if it's the end all be all for everything. But yet when you graduate from college, you want to hire somebody who has a new voice and writing something fresh and new. Well, how can you do that if you're telling them this is the way you have to write? So a very good vocalist I've worked with, she's the last vocalist that Count Basie hired. Her name is Carmen Bradford, known all across the world. She actually moved recently to Snellville, so she's in our backyard, and most people don't know. But I've been working with her, and she says all the time, gospel music, jazz, work songs, blues. She says the same church, different pew.
Yep.
And so our roots from gospel and jazz, do you know the blues, the only difference between the blues and gospel music was the lyrics at one point?
There we go.
The feel was the same. You could do that. Let's see. You could do the same feel. Well, I'm not singing. You don't know if that's gospel or blues.
Exactly. But not only that, but Dr. Dorsey said that. Okay.
Yes.
He said he was a blues pianist for Gertrude Ma Rainey. Okay.
Yes,
and he said, I wrote a lot of blues tunes, over 300. And he said, but God whispered in my ear and said, come out of it.
Right.
And so he said, the only thing he did, he changed the words. Because he said, it's the words, gospel. You are carrying the message of the gospel.
Wow.
He's right. And that's what he said. That is the difference. He didn't change the harmonic vocabulary at all. Right. Okay? He gets the words.
Right.
Wow.
So yeah, I think the evolution in schools need to be one in which where we don't do cookie cutter stuff, because it's such a subjective language for jazz. I might not be able to play as fast as somebody like Art Tatum.
Yeah.
But I might be able to have more soul like Horace Silver, who brought in the hard bop era where you had gospel musicians coming into jazz and playing, you know. So yeah, I think that and especially for gospel music, some of the gospel musicians playing right now, we as jazz musicians, we listen to some of these musicians like, what are they playing? You know what I'm saying? There was a time like, and I don't know who exactly started putting these the jazz chords in, but my earliest memory is probably, what's this piano player's name? Thomas. I can't think of his name, but everybody was talking about him was doing it. And then Commission, Fred Hammond, and
Fred Hammond, yeah.
They started putting these jazz chords in, and that's how I met my girlfriend at the time, because she wanted to learn the jazz chords to put in. Well, now these guys now are playing so much stuff, and there's so much tutorials on YouTube. I'm like, how are these putting all these complicated harmonic things in? So, you know, that really needs to be taught too. Because plenty of times Dr. Moses said, Tyrone, you ought to come and play. I was like, man, I don't know all this stuff like that. I know a couple of gospel things, you know.
But you know, it's really funny that you should say that, because do you know Twinkie Clark?
Yes.
The Clark sisters?
Yes.
Well, I interviewed when I was in Michigan, my last year in '84. I called their mother, Mattie Moss Clark. I knew her, and I had done some singing under her.
Oh, wow.
And so I just called them up and to interview her because my teacher asked me to write this paper on gospel music. So I called her and I was talking to her about it, and I asked her about what made music gospel. And she said, she said, my whole thing is that you have to stay true to the gospel harmonies. She said, I have to get on Twinkie. Sometimes Twinkie, she's playing all those diminished chords.
Twinkie is bad to the bone. Twinkie is bad.
They're coaching. And look, and I was just saying to a student the other day, those folk in church, they would tell you right away, that ain't gospel.
That's what they say, yeah. She went to Howard, didn't Twinkie went to Howard like one
She went
year?
to Howard. She went to Howard,
yeah. She was studying jazz at Howard too. She was incredible.
But her mother was the Bible on gospel.
Yes.
And in fact, her mother is the person who is given credit for bringing harmony to the gospel choir. Her mother was the first one, because prior to that, all gospel choirs sang in unison, sang in heterophony. It wasn't, they just opened their mouths and started singing. Okay, no parts. And then she first started it as soprano, alto, tenor. And believe it or not, it hasn't moved much farther from that nowadays. Right. But it was Mattie Moss Clark who started that. Right. Yeah. So, but she said, she had to get on Twinkie about all these modern chords. And
Well, I mean, I'm learning so much from just this. I know Anthony freaked out when he heard anything, the Clark sisters, because he's always playing those tunes all the time around us. And so with this month, with us wanting to focus on, celebrating Black history, as we talked about earlier, American history in general, and this episode topic being the impact of jazz and gospel music on Black history, American history in the music field. I guess for our audience who may not know the traditions and origins of jazz and gospel music and how they affected and how they fit into American history and Black history, and also the role that they have with the music field, can you give us an insight of what you see that as?
If you permit me, Dr. Moses, I'll start. Okay.
Please.
You have to think about African American traditions being not equal as much as the people that's involved with it, but the music was embraced to a certain part. I'll give you an example. Swaying your hips and doing certain things in the blues music, whatever, had been done since the Emancipation Proclamation, 1865, where they was freed, Abraham Lincoln. And yet you have someone like Elvis come along, and when he first started mimicking African-American culture, he made so much money off it. Now, I'll just take one song, for example. You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog.
Yeah.
Big Mama Thornton did that song first, and she made a lot of money off of it, especially for the African-American woman. Mm-hmm. But he did it a couple of months later, and he went 3 times as much as what Big Mama Thornton did.
Big Mama Thornton did.
I say that to say this: if it wasn't for Elvis doing that, the culture wouldn't have spread, because when it got introduced to white culture, that's when people started really going crazy about it. And then it spread to because of the World War, the GIs would bring their records and stuff like that and hear the radio and tune into the radio. And that's when Europeans started hearing. Now, America had forgotten about the blues. It wasn't until the Rolling Stones started coming, the British invasion, and Eric Clapton came in, that they were interested back in those old guys who did the blues, So the things that we learned from jazz is that the people suffered a lot to bring this music to it, oftentimes going through back doors, going through not being able to eat at certain restaurants and stuff like that, and being able to play. We can't take that for granted, and we have to build upon that motif. But the music had continually evolved. And the thing about jazz, that it used to be a form that you dance to, right? And then when he stopped dancing to it, when bebop came along and everybody started listening to it, it became a monument where you just go and sit down and you clap whenever. There's no more dancing to it. I think that's when the music started really just kind of becoming stagnant, and then now it's part of academia and stuff like that. But it really was a viable, had a viable place in our community. And I think that if we taught kids more about jazz, about blues, about gospel music, and educated them about it, and know that it's our America's original art form.
Yeah.
Even bluegrass, if you look it up, the banjo is an African instrument. Now, most people don't know that, and most people from America, especially country people, will say that's not true, you know. But you could look up Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. Bela Fleck is from Hungary, and there's a documentary of him visiting Africa, and seeing the original banjo players. So, Lauren, I don't know if I answered your question. Can you give me a little taste of your question again so I can make sure?
Absolutely. That's exactly, just wanting to hear more about the traditions of jazz and gospel music, and just like how like the impact it's had on history. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But let me add a little bit to that. But I think also in terms of the blues, from where the blues came from, the blues was not really respected in the Black community.
No.
People who went to church on Sunday did not listen to the blues. So, and I've taught this over and over again in class. I said, you know, in the white community, you know, people run and grab and celebrate the blues. And I said, look, I know I had family members that we didn't really respect because they drank moonshine, and I had some cousins that played the boogie woogie on the piano. And they were not people that you wanted to be around, you know? And so that I say that all the time. And also with Dorsey in playing remember, now he played for Gertrude Mulroney, and he played, and Bessie Smith was in that. Now that was not a life that Black folk embraced, because it was kind of like a lot of underground, and Bessie Smith was hanging out with gangsters, her boyfriend, you know. So this was not music that Black folk wanted to embrace. So when Dorsey brought his music into the church, they said, we don't want that old bluesy sound in church. Ministers said, we don't want our congregation to be rocked, because Black folk were trying to emulate the white church a lot. So they were singing hymns and anthems, okay? Not the blues. But where the blues was, and Dorsey's music was accepted, you had those people who were migrating from the South to the North, Chicago to New York, from Alabama, from Mississippi, and they were meeting up. What they found out was that life was not easier in the North. They still couldn't find jobs in the North. They still were treated the same way to a great extent. So therefore, what Dorsey was saying in his songs, and what he was playing for Gertrude Mulroney, it fitted their life more or less. So Dorsey's religious music then fitted more the underclass Blacks, the lower class Blacks. And that's where gospel went. It went to those folk who were street sweepers, who worked in factories, you know, those people. So it was a thing when I got dressed up on Sunday and went to church, and I could really, you know, have a good time in church. But I didn't go to those big churches, those sophisticated churches where they sang hymns and sang anthems. No, okay? Yeah. But so Dorsey tells the story. He told the story. He was trying to get his music heard. And he said everybody would tell him, come and sing your music. And he would come and they would ignore him. And this one pastor said, okay, Tom, come to my church on Sunday morning. I'm going to put you up just before bringing soloists. I want you to sit right on the front row, and we're going to put you up. And he said he and his musician, he and his soloists, they got there. They had the opening, They had the prayer. They read the scripture. He said, then they took up the offering and they had the sermon. They did the invitational hymn. They did the dismissal and left me and my soloist sitting right on the front row. Never, never acknowledged him, never even introduced him. That's how much they did not want Dorsey's music in church. They did not want it because it was too close to the blues. You know, it was so what Tyrone just played, you know, they didn't want that in church, you know. And in fact, in 1969, when Edwin Hawkins came out with Oh Happy Day, they didn't want that in church. And I remember, I know friends who say they start playing Oh Happy Day and those women say, we don't want that in here. Okay? Yeah. And so we did the same thing to Kirk Franklin when we did Stomp. We don't want that in here.
And Melodies from Heaven.
Melodies? Yeah. We don't want that.
And, you know, it's funny. It's so funny because like my grandmother, it's when I go to church and it sounds like good old church. And when we get away from church and she's like, because I would say something about something on the radio and she was like, oh no, I don't listen to that blues. And I'm like, Grandma, it's not the blues anymore. But like the story that you're saying of like how it is not, was not looked great upon back then. I definitely can relate with that. Just hearing my grandma saying that. And I look at her like, wait, what was this a thing? Was this like how it was?
There were a lot of things too. There's a lot of things where music, instruments were there. You would wail in there. And look, Alan Lomax talks about the tradition of the women were really in charge of the worship. And it was them singing these kind of lines, this moaning kind of thing, right? And there was no instruments. They didn't want any instruments in there. And I don't know, Dr. Moses, maybe you can tell me when instruments started becoming part of the church, but it wasn't that. They didn't want you to play. And even to this day, there's some churches you go to when it's time for that old deacon to get on his knees. Oh, Heavenly Father, you better not play. Don't play nothing right there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, because that to this tradition of the line out hymn, you know, where that was. And they didn't have instruments then. If they had instruments, see, I grew up in South Carolina, and this is interesting because Tyrone, you grew up in New Orleans.
I did, yep.
See, now that's an interesting music tradition.
Yes.
Because New Orleans, you've had the Congo Park, and you've had all of that music and even the classical in New Orleans. And also, so Tyrone has this rich tradition he comes from. Me, I come from South Carolina. And as a little boy, the instruments I remember in some churches was, of course, there was a piano in my church, which is a Baptist church. And that was the sophisticated church. But then if I went to visit my aunt, they had the bass drum, you know? and they had tambourines, okay? And so, and those were the instruments. And somebody would bring a washboard and they may have, you know, but they didn't even have pianos in some of those churches, you know? So this whole thing of pianos could really be since the 70s in some of these churches in the South. And maybe for some, it could be right now. I have some cousins in South Carolina. When I go way down to St. Stephen's in Johnsonville, they still no pianos. It's guitar. Yes, exactly. You know, so things aren't changing so fast, but they're changing gradually.
Right.
Well, we, you know, I have this one last question, and I feel like I could talk to y'all like for a whole day about the history of both jazz, gospel, spirituals, and everything. But for our last question for right now, I want to know, what do y'all hope, what would you like to see in the future regarding jazz, regarding gospel, regarding spirituals in higher education? We didn't really talk about spirituals a lot, but I know it definitely, I think it gets placed on the back burner a lot of the times. Or if somebody do a spiritual, it's always the closer. It's never really talked about as much. So what would y'all like to see in the future regarding those three mediums of Black music?
Well, I'll start Tyrone this time. But certainly, I would like to see the respect given to those genres of music, academically speaking, so that, and I think now it has just been approved recently that students can perform spirituals in competition. Okay, that's, yeah. So this music, a book of repertoire songs that singers can sing came out, the new book for vocal literature. And I think there was one African American composer in the book, one.
Wow.
And there was listed one song, you know, that was accepted in this thick book that I have that's called vocal literature. So that has to change. You know, that has to change, because we have so many African American composers who have written, who have arranged spirituals and who have composed, okay, music, several different genres, symphonic, choral, vocal, on every level. And you just can't you can't say you have an education in music and you can't name one song by an African American composer, or you can't name one African American composer, you know, and to say you're an American trained musician. And I think for you as educators, you kind of feel that there's something missing here. Why don't I know this?
Yes.
You know? And it is there. So I think that is the great problem now, that we really give much more room and recognition to African American composers and the history of African American composers in this country, because we have so many. We can go all the way back. You know, it was the Czechoslovakian composer Antonín Dvořák, who said of Harry T. Burleigh, you can take one of these songs that he has arranged, you can create a school of music around this. And you know what he was talking about? He was talking about the spiritual Go Down Moses.
Yes.
You know, so we start reading about the new biography, that just came out of Harry T. Burleigh, and how Antonín Dvořák looked at him as a composer and what he was doing, you know? So there's so much there, but I think we are moving, but as I said, not fast enough. And I know Tyrone can speak of that, because you can say the same thing of Duke Ellington and jazz. You can say, why don't we know Duke Ellington's symphonic music? Why don't we, you know? Where are we? So I'll just leave it there.
Exactly right. Man, it's funny that you said Dvořák, because the scale that they believe was a primitive scale, that pentatonic scale, you know,
yes. Right. Right.
That's the New World Symphony, right?
The New World Symphony. Yes.
That's a pentatonic scale, which is used in African culture, you know, Asian culture. Yeah. Dr. Moses said everything I would say about education as a whole. The only thing that I would add to it is that we got to teach African Americans about our history and about the music, because the top people in jazz right now are Asian or white. And we have a pocket of Black musicians, but if you go on YouTube, these kids that's killing the music right now, are not necessarily Black kids. And then you're finding out, even in gospel music, there's a lot of white kids learning this gospel.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'm all for that.
Yes.
But at what point do we forget that the originators of the music need to be involved with learning the music as well? And I think in our school system, we say, these kids today say, oh, that's old timey music. I'm looking forward to this, whatever. well, you wouldn't have that music if it wasn't for this music, you know.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
this is part of our culture, and it's worth learning because there's a lot of people making money off of it, and they're
Yeah.
not in the upper echelon of the people anymore
Yeah.
where it used to be. And I think that happens to be the problem with a lot of things with I'm reading this book by Walker. I can't think this lady's name, but it's called Their Highest Potential.
I don't know.
And it talks about this segregated school in North Carolina
Uh-huh.
and how they transitioned to desegregating schools, but they did so much to create this school that had a lot of excellence behind it, even though they didn't have the resources of the white counterparts. And so there's a lot of stories about HBCUs and how their programs, like, you look at Fisk University, all
Right.
these universities that was fundamental in the success of the music, that's no longer there anymore. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And people are not going to Morehouse to learn jazz, and people are not going to these other places. They going to Berkeley and all these other schools and Juilliard and all these other places to learn about jazz. But hey, the same thing is happening in sports. Where you best basketball players coming out of Duke University and Wake Forest. I mean, it used to come out of Southern and Grambling and Alcorn and Morehouse and Clark, and all these people came out of it, and Howard. So we have to educate our kids as well. We have to start playing this music for our kids.
Yes.
We got to start. The piano used to be a place where the entertainment center of the household was.
Right.
You don't have pianos anymore. Everybody got their headphones on. You at dinner time, you would interact. Am I right, Dr. Moses?
You're right, and they have these other appliances, keyboards.
Right.
And look, and I'm old school there. That you cannot beat that acoustic sound.
You cannot.
I don't care what you do. They can make some of the best and the finest, keyboards. But I think my thing has always been we need to train our ears to these acoustic sounds.
Yes.
So that we know what's there. And I was going to say, I think, remember when there was a thing I wanted to say. You were talking exactly what you were saying, but I wanted to say the idea of we've moved from a rote kind of learning of jazz to a written kind of learning of jazz, I think. Now, you can know much far better than me.
That is correct.
And many of our kids, we shy away from the study of reading. And so when you get away from reading the music, then you fall behind, because immediately if somebody hand you something, and I've said this over and over again even to my friends who are playing gospel, I try to find, if I'm going to teach gospel choir or something, I will try to find a piece of music with it written down.
Yes.
Okay. But then, you can't find every gospel pianist that can read. And the big problem is, I'll tell this story. I was at the gospel convention, Thomas A. Dorsey, National Convention of Gospel Choirs and Choruses. And I was coming from one session going to another, and I saw a friend of mine, Ted Thomas. He was furious. I mean, he was so angry. And I said, hey, Ted, what's wrong? He said, I cannot believe it. I can't believe these kids, they will play anything, any kind of complicated harmony, any kind of music, and you set a hymn in front of them and they can't read it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was coming from a session where he had just youth session, evidently just put a hymn down. They couldn't even read it.
You have to have literacy across the board.
You have to have literacy.
Across the board.
And that's it. Then where you guys come in.
Well, I mean, like Anthony said, we could sit here for 24 plus hours listening to your stories and all the knowledge that you have, and we're so appreciative. We wanted to do a game called Name That Standard and Gospel Tune. And so we've done this in the past with other like genres, but this will be fun because I don't think some people may know, some people might not. And so for those of you at home who are listening to this, like try to see if you can recognize it. If not, we'll have a season 1 playlist where we'll put all this music on. So you'll be exposed to this. So yeah, let's see what goes on. Anthony and Michael, if you want to try as well.
I think I'll be good. I think I'm good.
Remember, if y'all see my head go like this, it's frozen, right?
Oh Lordy.
Okay, so I'll start with the first one.
I can't hear. Wait a minute. It all disappeared.
It went
What
out.
happened? It went out.
I think pull it back from the mic a little bit.
Pull it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Try it
I'll
again.
try that again. Or I'll go to a different one.
Hey man, who's that cat coming down the street? I don't know, but it sounds to me like that wicked man with the bone. Still having himself a ball.
Harlem. So it's from the Harlem Globetrotters, but it's called
absolutely.
It's called. Don't tell me the name of it. Sweet Georgia Brown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sweet Georgia Brown. I didn't know that was the name of that. I knew that it was the Globetrotters, yes, but I never knew that was the actual name of it. I thought that was
sure. That theme. Yeah, know that theme. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Next
one.
What's the next one? Oh, it went away again.
It's going out again.
It's going out.
Oh, is this one going out for some reason? Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, maybe it's loud.
Okay, I'll pull it back even more then.
Oh, take the A train.
Got that. An A train.
Okay.
That would be an immediate one. Okay, next one.
Billy Strayhorn wrote that song though.
Yes. Huh? Can't hear it. What? I can't hear. Let's see. It's disappearing. It's so low I can't hear it.
So I pulled it back. I put a little bit further back. Do I need to push it?
I think we all have to be on mute. All of us have to be on mute, so it only goes on you.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah,
everybody
mute. And then
when Dr. Moses raises his hands to tell us what it is. But I think I might know it too. I heard a little.
I didn't hear anything. So let me see what.
I'm gonna mute you, Dr. Moses, so you can hear, because I think that's it. So let's try it.
Anthony, I mean, you know it.
I do, and the reason I know it is because Dr. Moses, you're muted. You're muted, Dr. Moses. Oh, let's unmute.
I said, yeah, I know the lyrics. The Lord is my light and my salvation, but I don't know that tune at all.
Do you know that it's funny because you taught me that song?
Which one?
It is "Whom Shall I Fear." You taught me that song in gospel choir. Yes,
really?
Dr. Moses. Yes, the reason I know that song is because I sang it with you in gospel choir like 3 years ago.
You know, it's the Zoom thing messed him up. It's the Zoom call messed him up.
I'm sure.
I'm really. Was Queen in there when you were in there?
Yes.
That's what Queen taught that song. I don't know that song. I know. Yeah.
That's it.
But I still don't know it.
Oh my Lord!
Queen.
You heard us practice that all the time, and it's one of my favorite songs now.
Really?
Yeah.
I know. I remember gospel choir singing it, but I don't know. Yeah.
I will tell you this, Anthony. As professors, we got so much stuff going on in our head and stuff.
Yeah.
At the time when it's going on, if somebody else is teaching it, that gives us a chance to do something.
There you go. Right. But as I said, but you know the text.
Yes.
The Lord is my salvation. You know, yeah.
Okay, here, I'll do another.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, that's Richard Smallwood. Total Praise, right?
Oh my gosh, that was barely
Yeah.
5 seconds.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, my favorite part in there.
Yeah, which one? Yes.
Which that part is like a Rachmaninoff thing. We did.
Right. Yes, there we go.
That's a Rachmaninoff thing.
Okay.
You gotta put my jazz in there.
There we go.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
This is great.
I mean, that was amazing. I mean, I'd rather hear you play than anything. I'd rather
Yes, exactly.
Well, we're just so thankful that you two had the time to join us for this episode today. And thank you so much for sharing your stories and your knowledge with us. And we're so excited for everyone to hear this and just all the comments and, the discussions that'll come because of this. So thank you so much.
You guys are welcome. And I'm really pleased that you're doing this.
Yes.
Okay. So, but you just kind of move the needle a little bit for us, and that's what, and you'll see that even as you grow as educators, that it's going to be, you will have to keep pushing that needle a little bit farther. So the responsibility that you have, to really move music, and many times, like Tyrone said, if it's going to be done, you may have to create it yourself and make sure it happens. But don't feel bad. Okay? Don't feel bad. Do it, and do it with a lot of pride. Yeah.
Wow. Thank y'all so much. Thank you. It was so great hearing y'all words. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you to our amazing guests, and I want to thank everybody for listening for this week. Please stay tuned for our coming up episodes. Thank you again for listening, and hope y'all have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of our conversation. You can learn more and reach out to us at relativepitchpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to our listening platforms and follow us on our social media. See you next time.